Before you close your eyes tonight, there's something you should hear. A signal, quiet, fragile, almost unsure of itself, has started transmitting again from deep space. It wasn't meant for anyone. It shouldn't even exist. And the crew who first decoded it never returned. So if you're listening now, just know you're about to understand why.
My name is Elias Wren, navigation officer aboard the research freighter Solace Meridian. We weren't a special crew, just 6 people drifting through the outer edge of the Ariadne scatter, running routine surveys on old mining routes. The kind of job where nothing ever happens, and you convince yourself that the quiet is a friend. I used to love that quiet. The soft hum under my feet, the steady pulse of the guidance panels, the way the stars outside looked like distant snowflakes frozen in a window. But 3 weeks into the mission, the routine changed. We picked up something small on long-range scans, a metallic object drifting without propulsion. No beacon, no rotation, no heat signature at all. Almost like the vacuum itself was holding it still. I remember leaning closer to the screen, noticing how strangely sharp the object looked, as if the darkness around it refused to swallow it. The captain wanted to catalog it and move on, but our researcher, Dr. Hale, insisted we bring it aboard for analysis. He said it would only take a night.
I stood in the docking bay when they brought it in. This strange metal sphere no larger than a helmet. Smooth, cold, completely silent. When I placed a hand near it, I swore I felt something. Not warmth, not vibration, but a subtle pressure, like the feeling of someone quietly exhaling beside your ear. That night, the ship didn't feel the same. The hum under the floors dipped just slightly, as though the engines were holding their breath. The lights flickered in soft, pulse-like rhythms. And when I tried to sleep, I kept waking to a faint glow slipping under my door, as if someone was walking the hallway with a dim lantern. But every time I opened the hatch, the corridor was empty, silent, cold. The next morning, Dr. Hale didn't show up for his shift. We tried to call him. Nothing. When we finally checked his quarters, he wasn't there. The bed was made. His tablet was untouched. It looked like he'd simply stepped out for a moment and never returned. It didn't make sense. No alarms, no airlock activity, nothing on the cameras. But the sphere in the lab was glowing faintly. A soft, pale blue, almost like moonlight trapped inside glass. When I got close to it, the glow brightened, and I felt it again, that gentle pressure, that quiet exhale, as if it was acknowledging me. That was the moment I realized something. The ship wasn't quieter, it was listening. And by that night, we all knew it. Every step felt watched. Every whisper felt answered by the faintest shift in air. And when I passed the lab on my way to my bunk, the sphere's glow spilled into the hallway, almost like it was waiting. If I had known what would happen next, I would have begged the captain to throw it back into the void, but by then, it was already too late. The night aboard the Solace Meridian felt endless. Not the kind of night where you count hours or glance at the clock.
This was a night that stretched like the void outside the hall, empty, heavy, and alive. Even the hum of the engines, the sound I used to take comfort in, was no longer steady. It trembled occasionally, just enough to remind me that something else was aboard with us. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. Every time I tried to close my eyes, I felt that same pressure. Soft, patient, almost like someone standing behind me, watching, not judging, just waiting. Around 0300, I heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving outside my cabin. Not random, not staggered, measured, almost synchronized with my own heartbeat. I forced myself to stay still, hoping it was just the ship settling, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. I opened the hatch. The corridor was empty. The lights flickered in their soft pulse, and somewhere ahead, the glow from the lab spilled into the hall like moonlight sliding under a door. I shouldn't have gone in. I knew that. But something drew me toward it. Curiosity, maybe, or fear, or something more primal. The sphere. The lab door opened before I could touch it. Floating above the table, rotating slowly, the sphere glowed a pale blue, calm and patient. I took a step closer and felt that gentle pressure again, the subtle exhale brushing across my mind like a whisper I couldn't hear.
Then I saw Dr. Hale, standing in the far corner, facing the wall, still, silent. It was impossible not to notice that the way he stood was unnatural, perfectly straight, with hands at his sides, not quite relaxed, not quite tense. He was listening, waiting. I called his name. No response. Only the soft pulse of the sphere intensified, almost like it was communicating or acknowledging me. I reached the table. The glow of the sphere brightened, reflecting off the polished metal surfaces. I felt the subtle ripple again, the mental nudge. Not words, not language, just thought. Come closer. I froze, heart thudding in my chest. But my body obeyed, moving step by step. Closer. The sphere hovered an inch above the table now, spinning slowly. The glow cast shadows across the lab that moved in impossible ways, stretching the walls, bending corners, folding reality in ways my mind could barely accept. Dr. Hale finally turned his head, his eyes empty. Not in the usual sense of absence, but hollow, as though looking past the room, past the ship, into a void I couldn't reach. His lips barely moved as he whispered, "It doesn't want the ship anymore. It wants a path."
Before I could respond, he pressed his palm on the table, not the sphere, just the cold metal, and the sphere reacted. Its surface rippled, light cascading across it in intricate, impossible patterns. Screens on the wall flickered to star charts, constellations I didn't recognize, routes that didn't exist on any known map, coordinates stretching far beyond the edge of settled space. I staggered back, overwhelmed by the impossible clarity. And then came the faint sound of movement, not mechanical, not human, soft scratching, a whispering hum, faint, like the memory of voices in a room where everyone has long since left. I wanted to turn, run, escape,
but my feet wouldn't respond. The sphere's glow pulsed with a rhythm I soon realized matched the slow rise and fall of Dr. Hale's breath, or rather the synchronized breathing of both him and the ship itself. It was a heartbeat in reverse, counting down, counting up. I couldn't tell. Time didn't feel linear anymore. I reached for the sphere, not to touch it, just to confirm it was solid, real, tangible. The moment my fingers brushed the air around it, the ship shivered. A low vibration coursed through the metal floor beneath my boots. Lights flickered, casting long shadows that stretched and moved independently. Panels hummed softly, or maybe it was my ears, maybe it was both. Then the lights dimmed completely. The glow of the sphere was all that remained, and in that dimness, I saw the outlines, just barely, of figures, not fully formed, just silhouettes, standing in the corners of the lab, the hallways, the control deck, watching, waiting, breathing with the sphere. Dr. Hale stepped toward me, but he moved in a way that seemed delayed, like he was out of sync with my perception of reality. "I've been listening too long," he said softly. "Now, we all are."
The hum deepened. I realized it wasn't just the engines, it was the ship itself. Breathing, watching, alive in a way I could not comprehend. I could feel it through the soles of my boots, through the air, through my own chest. A weightless presence that pressed, gently, insistently, reminding me that I was never alone. Never. I staggered back to the hallway. The glow from the lab followed me, spilling like a river across the metal deck. Every time I turned my head, shadows flickered in the corners of vision. Too precise to be coincidence, too patient to be natural. I tried to convince the captain, to tell him we had to jettison the sphere, abandon the ship, do anything. But when I reached the bridge, the controls were unresponsive. The autopilot had already overridden us. Engines pulsed toward a destination we didn't recognize. Coordinates from the sphere itself. We weren't in control anymore. Days, or maybe hours, I no longer knew, passed in silence. No alarms, no alerts. Just the soft, rhythmic breathing of the ship, the pulsing glow of the sphere, and the unblinking gaze of Dr. Hale, who by now seemed more like an extension of the vessel than a person. The final moment I remember clearly, walking into the lab one last time, the sphere floating midair, gentle glow illuminating the room, and seeing my own reflection in its surface. But behind me, tall, impossibly still, a figure I had never seen. Not human, not alien. Something older. Patient. Waiting. Watching. The glow dimmed just enough to erase the figure, and in the silence, the ship's engines ceased. The lights went dark, and we became another drift in the vast, endless black. Sometimes, when I close my eyes now, I can still feel it. The gentle exhale, the patient gaze, the knowledge that somewhere out there, it's waiting for the next person to wander too close.
My name is Mara Ilson, former systems engineer aboard the deep-range survey ship Vesper Linnea. We were a 4-person crew assigned to map gravitational anomalies near the edges of settled space. Quiet work, calm work, the kind that gives you long evenings to stare at the stars and forget the world behind you. But on the 12th day of the run, we received a distress signal, or at least we thought it was. It came through the comms in tiny, broken fragments,
soft flutters of static that almost sounded like breathing. Then a faint voice drifted in under it. Not a full sentence, just a single word, repeated gently, like someone calling from underwater. Over, over, over. Not over like radio protocol, more like a name. Clover. Soft, drawn out, barely there. None of us were named Clover. We tracked the signal to a geological survey vessel, the Arden's Wake, a ship registered to a 6-person crew, but according to long-range telemetry, it had been declared missing 17 months earlier. We found it drifting slowly along a decayed orbit around a dead, violet-hazed moon. No external damage, all lights off, life support inactive, windows dark.
Like a kind of ship that felt paused, as if time had stopped moving the moment they vanished. The captain wanted to log the find and wait for retrieval, but the voice, the way it repeated, the quiet strain beneath each syllable, I couldn't ignore it. We boarded at 1800 hours. The air inside was cold, thin, and carried a faint metallic smell, like old batteries and dust. Our helmet lamps cast narrow cones of light across the walls, but everything felt too still, like the darkness didn't want to be disturbed. The layout was standard, narrow halls, small cabins, the central lift, but the deeper we went, the more that voice crept into our comms. Not loud, never sudden, just a soft murmur threading between breaths. Clover, wait, don't. Sometimes the words faded before finishing. Sometimes they lingered too long, almost as if they were trailing behind us. We reached the bridge expecting chaos, overturned chairs, broken panels, signs of distress. But nothing was disturbed. 6 crew seats, 6 control stations. Not a scratch on the walls, not a hint of struggle. Just quiet, and the faint smell of ozone, as if something electrical had burned out long ago. That's when our medical officer, Lillian, noticed something strange. Her tablet detected faint biosignature traces, not enough to indicate a living person, but enough to suggest someone had been there recently. Recent, on a ship missing for 17 months. Something was wrong. We split up, 2 to engineering, 2 to crew quarters. I took the quarters. Walking down that dim hallway felt like moving through someone else's dream. My own breath sounded too loud inside my helmet. Every step felt out of place, like we were trespassing in a moment frozen in time.
The first few cabins were empty, beds made, personal items neatly arranged. No notes, no signs of panic. It almost felt like the crew had simply stepped out for a meeting and never came back. Then I reached the last cabin. The door hissed open a fraction before sticking. I pushed it the rest of the way. Inside, the room was spotless, except for one thing. Someone had written a single word on the mirror in their own cabin, written with a fingertip in the thin layer of condensation frozen there. Clover. I whispered the word without thinking, and that's when the breathing static filled my headset again. Louder this time. Closer. For the first time, the voice completed a full sentence. Don't let us land. Not angry, not panicked, just soft, afraid, begging. And before I could respond, the lights in the hall flickered, just once, like something passing between the circuits. Then Lian called over comms, her voice tight, trying not to sound shaken. Mara, I think you should come to engineering. We found something. There was a pause, a small, trembling breath. And it isn't human.
I should have turned back to the airlock. I should have told the others to leave that ship drifting where we found it. But curiosity, fear, and something else, something inside that whisper, it pulled me deeper. We were already too far in.
Engineering on the Arden's wake was colder than the rest of the ship, a still, breathless cold that felt older than the vessel itself. My helmet lamp caught dust drifting in the air, soft, slow, floating too smoothly, as if gravity wasn't certain what to do here. Lean and Holt stood near the engine core, their postures stiff. Neither of them looked directly at me. Instead, they stepped aside, and I finally saw it. Not a body, not a creature, just a shape, a faint outline pressed into the metal floor, human-sized, but not quite human-shaped. More like someone had lain there for a long time, so long the metal beneath them remembered their weight. Except the imprint was slightly wrong, too long in the limbs, shoulders too narrow, fingers too tapering. And around the edges of the indentation, the metal looked pulled, as though something had gently sunk into it, not crushing it, not burning it, but settling into the material as if it were soft clay. Holt kept his voice low. We scanned for heat signatures. Nothing. No cellular residue either. He paused, but the metal reads as displaced, like it was pushed aside from the inside. I knelt, shining my light along the edges. Something shimmered faintly, not a liquid, not a residue, more like a thin film of static that flickered when I breathed too close to it. And beneath that shimmer, a pulse, not mechanical, not electrical, a soft, rhythmic expansion, like the echo of a heartbeat long after the heart is gone. I stood too quickly, my gloves brushing a console. The moment I touched it, the whole engineering bay hummed, quiet, low, like a sigh from deep inside the ship. Then, our helmet comms shifted into static, not loud, soft, measured, breathing. Clover, stay, stay, don't let us land. The lights dimmed in a slow, sweeping wave that rolled from one end of the room to the other, and the Arden's wake came alive. Panels flickered on by themselves, screens changed to star maps, coordinates flashed, all leading back to the dead violet moon where we found the ship. Holt tried overriding the system, but the controls ignored him. The ship's course changed, engines rumbling awake beneath us. The Arden's wake wanted to return. But why? Leon backed toward the wall, breathing fast. Mara, look at the imprint again. I turned, and the imprint, the shape on the floor, was different. No longer still, no longer quiet. The shallow rise and fall beneath the metal, the soft pulse we thought was the ship. It was breathing, very slowly, as if waking from an impossibly long sleep. I froze. We all did. Then the comms whispered again. Not one voice now, but several overlapping, soft and layered. Don't let us land. Don't let it land. Please, don't let us. My name is Orion Kale, former long-haul comms operator for the Orbital Relay Network. Most of my assignments were quiet. Weeks spent alone on a listening station, monitoring deep space chatter and routing signals between far-off colonies. Lonely work, but peaceful, predictable. Then I was reassigned to a drifting vessel tagged for recovery, the SV Elethea, a long-range survey ship found motionless between two dead stars. No distress call, no beacon, just a soft, repeating pulse on a forgotten frequency. Not enough to be a message, just enough to feel intentional, like a tap on a window. My job was simple: board,
Assess and re-enable the comms array. I arrived alone at 0200 hours. Docking clamps extended, atmospheric seals engaged, and when the hatch slid open, a thin draft of cold air drifted through, the kind of cold that had weight, as if the darkness inside had been undisturbed for far too long. The interior lights didn't activate. My helmet lamp cut a narrow beam through the hall, catching dust hanging suspended in the air. It looked like snow frozen mid-fall. As I stepped forward, the ship's floor vibrated gently beneath my boots, almost like it recognized the weight of a person again. I kept thinking, someone lived here, someone slept here, someone breathed here. But the silence felt too full, like it was still holding all the breaths the crew never exhaled. The control deck was pristine. No signs of fire, no struggle, no malfunction. Just 6 empty chairs, all facing forward, all pulled close to their consoles, as if the crew had been sitting in perfect silence, watching something on the main display, except the screens were dark. I found the first strange thing in the observation bay. A mug on a small table beside a chair, still half full of what looked like cold tea. A tiny ring of moisture clung to the rim. Not 17 months old, not even a week. Recent. Too recent. I checked the crew manifest, 6 names, 6 logs. The last entry was 12 days old, a simple status report about a routine scan of gravitational drift fields. Nothing unusual, nothing alarming, but each log ended the same way. We'll continue monitoring the movement. It hasn't noticed us yet. I remember reading that line 3 times, feeling the coldness set behind my ribs. What but the 6th bed, the one belonging to Captain Elena Rios, looked like someone had been sitting on the edge just moments before I arrived. The blanket was creased, the mattress dipped slightly, and on the wall above the bed, a phrase was written in small, careful strokes. If you hear it breathe, don't answer. I whispered the words to myself, and the lights in the hall flickered. A soft hum rose beneath my feet, not threatening, more like a cat turning in its sleep. I should have gone back to the airlock, but I followed the hum. Straight to the observation dome, a circular room with a tall window facing the void. When I stepped inside, every light gently dimmed. The stars outside were still, too still, not twinkling, not drifting, almost arranged. Centered in the window's view was a shape, not a ship, not debris, a long, thin silhouette, like a filament stretching through space, shifting only when I wasn't looking directly at it. My breath fogged inside my helmet, and for a moment, just a briefest moment, I heard something impossible. A slow inhale, not through my headset. I should have left right then, but the Alethea had waited too long in the dark, and something in that silence felt like a hand gently resting on my shoulder, inviting me deeper. I didn't understand what the crew had heard, not yet. I would, soon enough. I stayed in the observation dome longer than I should have, standing there, watching that long, shifting silhouette against the stars. Every time I blinked, it changed, not in shape, but in position, as if the space around it bent in slow, careful motions. I turned away for one moment, just one, to check the environmental readings. When I looked up again, the silhouette was suddenly closer, not dramatically, just enough to notice, as though it had drifted a few miles without disturbing the fabric of space at all. A faint pressure crept into my ears, like someone whispering so softly the words never formed.
I stepped back, and the breathing in the comms, the slow, quiet pattern that had followed me since boarding, matched my steps, one for one. When I left the dome, the lights brightened slightly, as if the ship approved, as if it had been waiting for me to turn away from that window. The corridor felt narrower than before, the air colder, and somewhere deep in the hull, a slow vibration pulsed, steady, rhythmic, almost like a heart.
I made my way toward the bridge, not to fly the ship. I wasn't interested in moving it, but to check the logs again. Something about the captain's last message bothered me. The bridge doors slid open with a soft sigh. The 6 empty chairs faced the blank display just as before, perfectly aligned, quietly expectant. I approached the captain's station and initiated the last log entry. Captain Rios's voice filled the room, tired, calm, but with a thin layer of fear beneath the composure. It watches from the bend in the field. It shifts only when we look away. If we stare too long, it stops moving, and I think it starts listening. A long pause, then a softer whisper. The crew feels it breathing through the walls. It doesn't want us to leave. It wants someone to stay awake with it. The log ended abruptly. No distress, no final message, just silence. I replayed it twice, my gloves resting on the console. The metal beneath my palm warmed slightly, not from the system, but from something deeper, as if the ship recognized the touch. And then I noticed the chairs. On the first pass through the bridge, I hadn't paid attention to them. But now I saw it clearly. Each chair had a shallow impression, as if someone had been sitting there for a long time. Not heavy enough to deform the material, just enough to suggest presence. 6 seats, 6 impressions, and the captain's chair still warm. I stepped back, slowly. The ship lights dimmed in response, soft, hesitant, like they didn't want me to go. On instinct, I pressed my hand to my helmet, trying to steady my breath, but the breathing I heard wasn't mine. A soft inhale, a slower exhale, right behind me. I left the bridge quietly, not wanting to disturb whatever listened in its corners. In the main corridor, the temperature dropped again. Frost traced thin white lines along the edges of the wall panels, not random patterns, but shapes. Long, tapering lines, curved arcs, repeating marks, almost like the outline of fingers touching from the other side of the metal. I made it back toward the airlock, my steps slow, the hum beneath the floor following each movement. Then, the ship spoke. Not through the speakers, not through comms, through the metal itself. A low, shuddering whisper, a sound like air moving through the lungs of something impossibly large. I froze, not from fear, from understanding. The crew hadn't vanished. They hadn't escaped. They had answered. They stayed awake with it, long enough for their presence to sink into the vessel, into the seats, into the walls, into the quiet. A soft exhale brushed the back of my neck. The silhouette outside the dome shifted again. I didn't see it. I just felt the space changing. Closer. Listening. Waiting. My boots reached the threshold of the airlock at last,
The metal beneath my heels vibrated, slow, pleading, as if asking me not to leave. I kept moving, step by step. When I sealed the inner door, the hum faded to silence. The breathing stopped. The frost lines along the walls stilled. The ship let me go. My shuttle detached with barely a tremor. As I drifted away, I looked through the rear viewport. The Aletheia floated in darkness, quiet, patient, as though it had simply closed its eyes again. And behind it, that long silhouette faded back into the starfield like a thin shadow sinking into water. Sometimes in the quietest hours of my night shifts, I still hear that soft inhale and the slower exhale right behind me. Not threatening, just present, just watching, waiting for someone to stay awake with it again. If you're still awake, thank you for drifting with me through the dark. Space is endless, and so are its secrets. If this journey kept you company tonight, feel free to stay close. There are many more stories waiting just beyond the next star. Rest now, and when the shadows call again, I'll be here to guide you through the void. Good night, traveler.